You'd think the fastest, most advanced motorcycles would always be celebrated, right? But what if I told you some were banned for being too fast, too loud, or even too dangerous to insure? And here's the twist. One of them literally ran on a jet engine. In this video, I'll show you 13 legendary bikes the world decided were simply too extreme to be legal. Number 13, MTT Y2K Turbine Superbike 2000 to present. Let's start off with a bike that sounds like science fiction, the MTT Y2K Turbine Superbike. Instead of a normal engine, it used a Rolls-Royce helicopter turbine. Yes, you read that right, a jet engine strapped to a motorcycle frame. The result? Up to 320 horsepower and a top speed well over 227 miles per hour. On paper, it sounds like the ultimate thrill ride. In reality, it's one of the most impractical and restricted bikes ever made. For starters, turbines burn jet fuel, producing massive amounts of emissions that easily exceed motorcycle regulations in Europe and North America. That alone made it a bike so extreme that even getting it legally on the street is basically impossible. Well, there's the noise. At full tilt, the Y2K screams at over 140 decibels. That's louder than a jet taking off and far above legal noise limits. Add in the fact that it has no engine braking, leaving riders totally dependent on its carbon ceramic brakes, and you start to see why safety authorities were uneasy. Insurance companies flat out refused to cover it, and most governments banned it from public roads altogether. Owners received only track use certificates, meaning the only place to ride one legally is on a racetrack or private land. Only a handful were ever built, and they've since become unicorns of the motorcycle world. Number 12, Suzuki GSXR 1100, 1986 to 1998. Moving on, when Suzuki unleashed the GSXR 1100 in 1986, it was supposed to be the ultimate superbike, a monster with 156 horsepower that could dominate road and track alike. And while it did deliver insane straight-line speed, it also carried a dangerous flaw. Its chassis just couldn't keep up. Suzuki stuck with an older double cradle frame design, and under the stress of that massive engine, the frame flexed badly. Riders described it as developing unsettling low-frequency wobbles under braking, especially at high speeds. The 1989 K model was particularly notorious, with geometry and suspension quirks that made it unpredictable. It was fast, no doubt, but not always controllable. That reputation earned it a dark nickname, the weapon of choice for hooligans. Riders loved its brutal power, but it came at a deadly cost. In 1989, racer Phil Mellor was killed riding a GSXR 1100K at the Isle of Man TT. The dangers became so serious that race organizers temporarily banned big capacity bikes like it from competition. Few motorcycles have ever been banned from racing for being too dangerous, but the GSXR 1100 earned that shady honor. Even later models had issues, with frame cracking under extreme stress leading to recalls. Suzuki kept refining the formula, but the early reputation stuck. For many, the GSXR 1100 was both a dream and a nightmare, an untamed beast that demanded respect. Number 11, Aprilia RS 250, 1994 to 2004. But while Suzuki was chasing brute force, Aprilia went in the opposite direction, lighter, sharper, and deadlier in the corners. Launched in 1994, this Italian beauty became an instant cult classic, widely considered the finest road-legal two-stroke sport bike ever made. At its core was a Suzuki RGV 250 engine, heavily modified by Aprilia to produce around 70 screaming horsepower at 11,000 RPM. It wasn't just about power though. The RS-250 had a razor-sharp chassis and featherweight build that made it one of the best handling motorcycles of its time. Track riders still rave about how planted and precise it felt, like it was begging to be pushed harder every lap. But with greatness came risk. The RS-250 was unforgiving, with the usual two-stroke, light-switch power delivery and absolutely no rider aids. No traction control, no ABS, just raw skill versus raw speed. For experienced riders, it was a dream. For anyone else, it could be a fast ticket to trouble. Despite selling over 40,000 units, the RS-250 couldn't survive the tightening grip of emissions regulations. In 2004, Aprilia ended production, and with it, the era of road-going two-strokes. That finality only added to its legend. This was the last true two-stroke superbike you could buy from a showroom. Today, the RS-250 is a prized collectible, cherished by riders who crave pure, unfiltered motorcycling. Number 10, Yamaha TZR 250, 1986 to 1995. Next up, the Yamaha TZR 250 was the kind of bike that carried the two-stroke flag into its final days. A machine born from Grand Prix inspiration, but ultimately strangled by emissions laws. For riders in the late 80s and early 90s, it was pure magic on two wheels. Fast, light, and brutally demanding. Its 259cc parallel twin two-stroke engine made 45 horsepower in restricted form, but tuners quickly learned that they could squeeze out much more. Combine that with a dry weight of just 280 pounds and you had a power-to-weight ratio that could embarrass bikes with double the displacement. On twisty roads or racetracks, the TZR could eat giants for breakfast. But here's the catch. It wasn't easy to ride. Like most two-strokes, it delivered its power in an explosive, all-or-nothing rush. 1 second it was tame. The next it was screaming and surging forward, demanding absolute focus. For experienced riders, it was thrilling. For beginners, it could be terrifying. Unfortunately, the timing wasn't on Yamaha's side. By the mid-1990s, governments were cracking down hard on two-stroke engines. The smoke, the noise, the emissions, they all made bikes like the TZR public enemy number one. In 1996, Yamaha pulled the plug, marking the end of the 250cc two-stroke sport bike era. Number 9, Honda NS400R, 1985 to 1988. Of course, Honda couldn't just sit back and watch. Their answer was the NS400R, a machine that tried to balance performance with restraint. Introduced in 1985, it wasn't banned outright, but changing laws and market realities quickly pushed it into extinction. At its core, the NSR 400 had a 387cc liquid-cooled two-stroke V3 engine that produced 72 horsepower at nearly 10,000 RPM. It wasn't as powerful as the RZ500 or RG500, but it was still a serious machine that demanded respect. Lightweight, sharp handling, and buzzing with GP-inspired engineering, it gave riders a taste of racing without the sheer madness of the bigger 500s. But being a two-stroke in the late 1980s came with built-in problems. Emissions were awful, fuel economy was poor, and the peaky power delivery made it unforgiving. As regulations got stricter, Honda realized keeping the NS400R alive just wasn't worth the fight. By 1988, production stopped, marking Honda's quiet retreat from the two-stroke street bike market. Number 8, Kawasaki Ninja H2R, 2015 to present. Now, most banned bikes come from decades past, but Kawasaki proved in 2015 that the danger isn't gone, it's just evolved. Meet the Ninja H2R, a motorcycle so extreme it's not just discouraged from street use, it's outright banned worldwide from public roads. Think about it. A bike so powerful that governments around the world won't even let you ride it on the street? Well, this isn't your average superbike. The H2R packs a supercharged 998cc engine that spits out between 310 and 326 horsepower. That's more power than many small cars, and it's even packed into a machine built for one thing: insane track performance. Kawasaki didn't even bother pretending it was street legal. There are no headlights, no turn signals, no mirrors, not even a license plate mount. Just a smooth, razor-sharp nose built for speed. It runs on racing slicks, which are useless in bad weather and illegal on public roads. And even if you bolted on the missing parts, the noise, emissions, and sheer brutality of this machine would never pass legal standards. When you buy an H2R, it comes with a manufacturer's statement of origin, the same paperwork given for race cars or dirt bikes. Proof it's not meant for registration. Number 7. Yamaha RZ500 RD500LC, 1984 to 1987. If the Ninja H2R was raw chaos, Yamaha's answer, the RZ500, also called RD500LC, was pure outlaw spirit. This wasn't some watered-down replica. It was a V4 two-stroke monster that brought Kenny Roberts' YZR500 DNA straight to the streets. Weighing just 438 pounds, it was deceptively light, but inside beat the heart of a fire-breathing racer. It was pumping out around 88 horsepower, enough to push its lightweight frame past 140 miles per hour. In the mid-80s, that was race bike speed disguised with headlights. Riders often said it felt almost illegal to even look at, let alone ride. And in the US, that wasn't far off from the truth. The RZ500 was never officially sold there. Regulators kept an entire machine off US roads because they knew it was simply too much. It was too loud, too fast, and way too close to a full-blown GP bike for comfort. Environmental laws and safety concerns made it impossible to get federal approval. Even in Europe, governments and manufacturers agreed to limit top speeds because of bikes like this. Number 6. Suzuki RG500 Gamma, 1985 to 1987. Coming in at number 8, the Suzuki RG500 Gamma was one of those bikes that blurred the line between racing and street riding. Nicknamed Whispering Death, it was basically a Grand Prix machine disguised with headlights and mirrors. Imagine walking into a dealership in the 1980s and buying what was essentially a race bike you could ride to the shops. That's how wild this thing was. At its core was a square 4 two-stroke engine pumping out around 95 horsepower, with a top speed of 140 to 150 miles per hour, depending on the setup. Below the band, it felt tame enough, but twist the throttle past 10,000 RPM and the 4 expansion chambers would scream like nothing else on the road. It was raw, unapologetic, and had no interest in making life easy for the rider. You either respected it or it punished you. But that unfiltered experience didn't last long. By the late 80s, governments were tightening the noose on two-strokes. Emissions, noise, and insurance regulations all came crashing down on bikes like the RG500. Its trademark scream, once music to enthusiast ears, became the very reason it was targeted. Insurance companies labeled it an extreme risk, and dealers started refusing to sell it out of fear of liability. Number 5. Yamaha RD350, 1973 to 1995. Moving on, when the Yamaha RD350 rolled onto the scene in the early 1970s, it instantly became one of the most feared and respected two-strokes in the world. Riders nicknamed it Racing Death, and once you've heard how it rode, you'll understand why. The bike came in 2 versions, the high torque with 31 horsepower and the low torque with 27 horsepower. On paper, those numbers don't sound earth-shattering, but here's the trick. The RD350 was incredibly light, and that made all the difference. This little twin could rocket from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 5 seconds and touch 100 miles per hour at full tilt. In the early 70s, that kind of acceleration put it right up there with some of the quickest bikes on the road. Interestingly, the RD350 wasn't banned anywhere. What killed it was tightening emissions laws and its poor fuel economy compared to four-stroke. Yet, its legend lives on. Number 4, Vincent Black Shadow, 1948 to 1955. Yet decades earlier, another machine held that crown. The Vincent Black Shadow was so fast it terrified even professional racers. Launched in 1948, it's often called the world's first superbike, and with good reason. Its 998cc V-twin pumped out 55 horsepower, propelling it to 125 miles per hour, making it the fastest production motorcycle of its day. But that speed came at a terrifying price. The Black Shadow didn't even have a traditional frame. Instead, it relied on the engine as its stressed member, which meant the bike flexed badly in corners. Riders described it as bending like a soggy French fry, hardly the confidence you'd want when tackling a fast bend. And the brakes, they weren't designed for a machine this fast. Commands at the lever felt more like polite requests than actual stopping power. Its reputation grew so notorious that Hunter S. Thompson famously said, "If you rode the Vincent Black Shadow at top speed for any length of time, you would almost certainly die." It was grim humor, but it wasn't far from the truth. Within the Vincent Black Shadow Society, riders joked that the ultimate dream was to find a widow who had one sitting untouched in her basement, a dark nod to how often these bikes outlived their owners. Despite its dangers, the Black Shadow became an icon. It was beautifully engineered, brutally fast, and undeniably ahead of its time. But it demanded respect, because one wrong move, one reckless twist of the throttle, and this superbike could easily become your last ride. Number 3, Broff Superior SS100, 1924 to 1940. And before Vincent, there was the Broff Superior SS100, a motorcycle so refined it was called the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles. The Broff Superior SS100 was a motorcycle of contradictions, elegant yet dangerous, powerful yet fragile. Powered by a JAP V-twin engine that produced up to 50 horsepower, the SS100 could crack 100 miles per hour, which was nothing short of astonishing for its era. But here's the catch. The chassis and brakes were nowhere near capable of keeping up. Riders described the handling as evil when pushed, especially around corners on less than perfect roads. The brakes were so poor that stopping felt more like suggesting rather than commanding. And when leaned hard into a turn, the bike often developed a snake-like wobble that could rattle even the most skilled rider. The bike's most infamous rider was none other than T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. In 1935, while riding his SS100, Lawrence swerved to avoid two boys on bicycles, lost control, and suffered fatal head injuries. His death became historic. The neurosurgeon who treated him went on to pioneer research that eventually led to helmets becoming mandatory, forever changing motorcycle safety. Riders like Hunter S. Thompson later summed up machines like this with chilling clarity. Ride it at top speed long enough, and death was almost certain. Number 2, Suzuki TM400 Cyclone, 1971 to 1973. Fast forward to the 1970s, and Suzuki went the other way with the TM400 Cyclone, a bike infamous for trying to throw its riders off. On paper, it didn't seem too extreme. A 396cc two-stroke single pumping out 40 horsepower and 33 foot-pounds of torque. But the devil was in how it delivered that power. The ignition system was unpredictable, mild 1 second, then bam, full blast without warning around 4,000 RPM. No smooth curve, just a violent snap of power that could throw even seasoned riders off balance. But what about the chassis? Utterly hopeless. The frame was flimsy, the suspension struggled, and the rear end had a nasty habit of fishtailing so wildly that riders could see it dancing in their peripheral vision. On rough straights, the bike looked less like a machine and more like a fish flopping on dry land. Imagine trying to keep control when the bike itself didn't seem to want to. The scariest part was its unpredictability. Even on flat, smooth ground, if you hit that torque band just wrong, the bike could literally buck you off. It wasn't a matter of if, it was when. Riders joked that the TM400 wasn't just a motocross bike. It was a ticket to the hospital. Some even called it the Dirt Widowmaker. Sales were as bad as its reputation, and Suzuki didn't fight too hard when the Cyclone faded from the market. Number 1. Kawasaki H2 Mach 4, 1972 to 1975. But no list of dangerous bikes is complete without Kawasaki's H2 Mach 4, the original Widowmaker that earned its nickname the hard way. When people talk about motorcycles that scared even the bravest riders, the Kawasaki H2 Mach 4 always comes up first. This beast, launched in 1972, quickly earned its infamous nickname, and trust me, that wasn't some marketing gimmick. It was a straight-up warning. At its heart was a 750cc two-stroke triple engine pushing out 74 horsepower and topping speeds of 126 miles per hour. Now that might not sound mind-blowing compared to today's superbikes, but back in the early 70s, this was like strapping a rocket to a bicycle frame. The way the power hit was downright brutal. You'd cruise along fine, then around 6,000 RPM, the bike would suddenly unleash everything at once, as if a sledgehammer had smashed into you. No smooth build-up, just raw chaos. The real problem, though, was the rest of the bike. The frame wobbled like jelly. The front end wandered around, and the brakes, well, calling them brakes feels generous. A single front disc or outdated drums just couldn't keep up with that kind of speed. Imagine trying to wrestle a wild bull while rolling down a hill. That's what it felt like. The bike got such a dangerous reputation that insurance companies practically laughed at anyone asking for coverage. Racetracks banned it. Lawyers smelled blood as crash-related lawsuits piled up. By the mid-1970s, stricter safety and emission laws sealed its fate, and Kawasaki pulled it from production. But here's the thing. Despite all its flaws, the H2 Mach 4 has become a legend. Riders still talk about it with a mix of fear and respect. It was an untamed force of nature. So, what do you think? Should bikes like these be kept on the streets, or are they just too wild to handle? Drop your take in the comments. I'll be checking them out. And hey, if you've ever twisted a throttle, you've got no excuse. Smash that subscribe button before it gets banned too.